Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking on one of those core concepts that you see everywhere, but maybe don't always get the full story on.
We're going to be talking about the internal architecture for achieving freedom.
Exactly. And our mission today is really for you, the person who wants to go beyond just, a list of terms.
Yeah.
We want to get into the deep functional mechanism of what awakening actually is.
And we're doing that by dissecting the 7 awakening factors, the bojjaṅgas.
Well,
These aren't just like a set of virtues to memorize. According to the sources, they are the very specific interacting components that guarantee liberation if they're developed correctly.
So today's deep dive is all about unpacking those 7 factors. We want to show you exactly where they fit into the bigger spiritual path, and I think most importantly, explain why they lead directly to knowledge and freedom.
It's the why that's so critical.
Okay, so let's start to unpack this. When we think about the basic framework of the path, we usually start with the Noble Eightfold Path, right?
That's the foundation.
But these 7 factors, mindfulness, investigation of principles, energy, rapture, tranquility, immersion, and equanimity, they almost feel like the gears and levers inside that bigger engine.
That's a perfect analogy. They're the inner workings. And here's the first thing that really jumps out from the text, something that's pretty significant.
Right, yeah.
These factors, this specific set of 7, they don't just arise randomly. They only arise to be developed and cultivated when a fully awakened Buddha has appeared in the world.
Wow, okay. That's a pretty provocative statement. Why? Why would this specific set of mental tools, which seem pretty universal, be dependent on a teacher showing up?
Because it's about the combination and the goal.
Yeah.
It's a complete and pure spiritual practice that is aimed solely at total liberation, at extinguishment.
I see.
So without a Buddha, people might stumble upon mindfulness, or they might develop incredible energy, for some other...
An athlete or an artist?
Exactly. But they won't necessarily put all 7 of these factors together in this very precise interlocking sequence, and they won't be building it on the key condition that the texts mention over and over again.
Which is?
Seclusion, fading away, and cessation. The bojjaṅgas are the perfected blueprint, optimized for that one final goal. You could say they're the scaffolding for this very specific ultimate building.
So our mission today is to really understand that blueprint, the structure of that perfected scaffolding, which, as you're saying, only exists because the path has been fully lit up for us. So let's start by establishing the destination. Where is this blueprint supposed to take us?
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of each factor, we absolutely have to define the ultimate purpose, and that purpose is total knowledge and freedom.
Right. And the texts often describe this in very powerful, very final terms, don't they? Like the ending of rebirth.
The end of rebirth, yes.
Now, that's a concept that can sound, pretty abstract to a lot of people. Can we get a more tangible sense from the text of what that freedom feels like for someone who's actually achieved it, beyond just, no more suffering?
It's described as realizing the undefiled freedom of heart and the freedom by wisdom.
Okay, and what does that mean in, a moment-to-moment experience?
On a practical level, it means that all bad, unskillful qualities, they just cease, and there's nothing left over. Think of it less as a mystical state and more as an absolute purification.
Ah, okay.
It's the end of sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. It's all gone. There's this one ancient verse that I think sums up the finality of it perfectly.
I hear it.
It says, "Any deeds I have done, a little or a lot, are all completely exhausted. Now there will be no more future lives."
So it's a state of complete certainty. You know it's over.
Unshakable certainty, that's the word they use.
So if that's the destination, total finality and purification, then the vehicle for the journey has to be the Noble Eightfold Path. How does that larger framework line up with these 7 specialized factors?
The Noble Eightfold Path is the overall road. It's the path that slants, slopes, and inclines towards that final extinguishment. You could call it the curriculum.
And the bojjaṅgas are?
They're the advanced subjects within that curriculum. They're what you focus on when the foundational work is done. The whole point of the NEP is to culminate in the removal of the 3 roots of all our problems.
Greed, hate, and delusion.
Greed, hate, and delusion. The NEP sets the stage, it cleans the ground so that these awakening factors can actually grow.
Which is really helpful for anyone trying to figure out where to begin.
Yeah.
You can't just, decide to jump into advanced concentration states on a Tuesday.
No.
The sources seem to point to a very clear step-by-step progression, right? It's not a buffet where you can just pick and choose what you like.
Absolutely not. It's a sequence. The progression always starts with hearing the teaching and gaining that initial right view.
The correct understanding.
Yes. And once you accept the fundamental truths of how reality works, that insight just naturally leads you to build the ethical foundation.
And that's our right thought, right speech, right action, and right livelihood.
Exactly. The whole ethical portion of the path.
That's the clean foundation you were talking about.
It is. And only once that foundation is pure and stable can you begin the really intense, focused work of purification. That's right effort.
Okay.
And it's this right effort that prepares the ground for the deep, concentrated work of meditation, right mindfulness and right immersion.
And that's where the 7 factors live.
That's their home. This structure confirms that the awakening factors operate exclusively within that final, high-purity environment of deep concentration.
So the path literally begins with how you live your life, with impeccable conduct. The texts I remember say that an ethical life is the vital condition for having no regrets.
And that phrase, no regrets, is everything. It's the key that unlocks the next stage.
Unpack that a little. Why is no regret so important?
Well, think of it this way. The ethical life is like pouring a perfectly clean, stable, concrete foundation for a skyscraper. If your conduct is intact, impeccable. If you restrain yourself from even the slightest fault,
You sleep well at night.
you sleep well, you have no remorse, no regret nagging at you, and the texts lay out a causal chain. If you have no regret, you generate joy.
Wow.
That joy naturally leads to rapture. The rapture then settles down into tranquility. Tranquility leads to bliss. And only then, when you're in that state of bliss, do you naturally arrive at right immersion.
So regret and remorse they're literally described as the primary static, the noise that blocks the signal of deep concentration.
That's a blockage. You
Yeah.
can't get there if your mind is agitated by things you've done or said. It's impossible.
That's a powerful chain.
Yeah.
Purity creates joy, and that joy is the fuel for these higher factors.
Okay, so before we dive into the 7 factors themselves, there's another set of principles we should touch on. The 5 faculties. They seem to operate alongside the factors as a kind of measure of your progress. They are. The 5 faculties, faith, energy, mindfulness, immersion, and wisdom are, in a way, the seeds of the bojjhangas.
The raw ingredients.
The raw ingredients, yes. As you develop and cultivate these 5, you directly start to give up the fetters that bind you to this cycle of continued existence.
So you can think of the faculties as your raw potential, and the bojjhangas as what?
As the fully calibrated, high-performance manifestation of that potential in the actual moment of insight. They are the faculties coming online in a synergistic way.
And the strength of those faculties, the texts say, actually defines where a person is on the map of spiritual attainment.
Yes, from the beginner, the follower by faith, all the way up to the perfected one, the arahant. It shows that spiritual realization isn't an on or off switch. It's a graded progression.
It's a path with clear milestones.
Milestones defined by reduced attachment. The classic stages, stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, they show that purification happens step by step.
Which must have been incredibly clarifying for practitioners.
Immensely. It gives you a map. You know exactly what level of maturity you've achieved based on which specific fetters you have permanently, and I mean permanently, abandoned.
Okay, so we have our stable ethical foundation. We understand this graded map of maturity that's measured by the 5 faculties. Now we're ready to engage the engine, the 7 awakening factors.
Mindfulness, investigation of principles, energy, rapture, tranquility, immersion, and equanimity.
Before we detail them one by one, you mentioned a key operating condition that ties them all together.
Yes, this is crucial. All 7 must be developed relying on this specific trio of mental states: seclusion, fading away, and cessation.
Right. Now that triad seclusion, fading away, cessation, it comes up constantly in the sources, but it's pretty dense language.
Yeah.
For someone listening, what do those concepts actually mean in a moment-to-moment experience in meditation?
Let's break that down because it's vital. Seclusion, or viveka, is the first one. People often think of it as just physical isolation, like going to a quiet place.
A cabin in the woods.
A cabin in the woods, which is part of it, that helps. But here, it primarily means mental seclusion. It's the withdrawal from unskillful qualities and from the pull of sense objects. You are mentally separating yourself from the noise of the world and your own internal chatter of desires.
Okay, so it's an internal quiet, not just an external one. What about fading away? That sounds very poetic.
Fading away, or viraga, is the active process of developing dispassion. It's not just ignoring things, it's about seeing the impermanent nature of a sensation or a thought, watching its arising and its passing away, until its power to grab your attention simply fades.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you're holding a bright, flashing, very attractive light. At first, it's all you can see. But through intense, sustained observation, you start to realize the light isn't a solid thing. It's just a flickering pattern of energy. And as you watch it, its brilliance loses its appeal. Its power over you fades. That's viraga.
I see. It's deconstructing the allure.
Precisely. And that leads to the final one, cessation, nirodha.
Which is the total stopping.
It's the culmination. It's the moment when a negative quality, like a particular craving, arises. It's observed with that fading away mindset. And then it just vanishes. It ceases, leaving the mind clean.
So these three qualities, seclusion, fading away, cessation, they create the necessary environment.
They define the environment. They're what allow the bojjhangas to ripen into the ultimate goal, which is letting go. The factors are engineered specifically to help us achieve this withdrawal.
That clarifies the environment beautifully. Okay, let's go through the 7 factors in sequence, starting with the one that has to be there constantly. Mindfulness, sati sambojjaṅga.
Mindfulness is the primary practice. It's the ongoing observation of the 4 domains: the body, feelings, the mind itself, and principles, or dhamma.
And the definition in the text is very active, isn't it? It's not a passive state.
Not at all. It says you must be keen, aware, and mindful, and this is key rid of covetousness and displeasure for the world. So it's a continuous, non-judgmental awareness, but it has an active job to keep greed and aversion out. It's the foundation for everything else.
It's the gateway. The sources say that the 4 kinds of mindfulness are developed so as to fulfill the 7 factors.
Exactly. It's the starter. Without that keen awareness, you can't investigate. Without investigation, you don't know where to apply your energy. It all starts with paying attention correctly.
Let's use a practical example, like mindfulness of breathing. How does that practice fulfill these conditions?
Well, when you're observing the breath, you are practicing experiencing the whole body with the breath. You might even consciously practice stilling the physical processes. This dedicated effort of just being keen and aware is actively stripping away desire and aversion in real time.
How so?
Because your attention is fully occupied with a neutral object. There's no room for I want this or I hate that. It's just the breath. That continuous flow of pure attention is what keeps the whole system online and clean.
That deep, focused observation seems like it would naturally lead to the 2nd factor. Investigation of principles, dhammavicaya sambojjaṅga. This feels like where the practice moves from just awareness to active insight.
It is. Investigation is the mind's critical inquiry function kicking in. The dhamma, or principles, are the natural systems of cause and effect, how reality actually works underneath our stories about it.
So we're talking about analyzing and discerning the nature of conditioned reality.
Yes, and this isn't some abstract philosophical speculation. It's intellectual understanding applied directly to your immediate meditative experience. You're watching it happen.
So it's like you're using your own mind to repeatedly prove the core doctrines of the teaching to yourself.
Precisely. You're using the investigative factor to confirm in real time that form, feeling, perception, choices, consciousness, all of it is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. You are examining the 5 grasping aggregates as they rise and fall.
And this constant investigation, this seeking of truth is crucial because why?
Because it prevents the mind from defaulting back to its old habits of delusion. It's the wisdom component that keeps the path lit. Without it, mindfulness can just become a kind of dull, spaced-out state. Investigation keeps it sharp.
That level of critical inquiry and sustained presence would require a massive amount of drive. Which brings us to the 3rd factor, energy, or viriya sambojjaṅga.
Yes.
We hear about effort a lot, but the sources use much stronger language here. They call for extraordinary enthusiasm. What happens if a meditator gets focused, but that enthusiasm is just lukewarm?
If the enthusiasm is only mild, the practice will inevitably fall into one of 2 classic meditative traps.
Okay.
Either the mind becomes too lax, too loose, and it sinks into dullness and drowsiness. That's the passive resistance of the mind.
Been there.
We all have. Or the mind becomes too tense, too tight, and it gets restless and agitated. Extraordinary enthusiasm. The texts use words like zeal, vigor, perseverance, acts as the precisely calibrated engine.
It's the Goldilocks factor. Not too loose, not too tight.
Exactly. It ensures you have just enough effort to maintain that keen awareness and investigation without stressing the whole system out.
So how do you sustain that engine? Extraordinary enthusiasm sounds like it could be exhausting if you're trying to force it.
It's not forced. It's cultivated. It's done through really intentional mental management. The sources give this incredibly practical advice. They detail 8 specific grounds for arousing energy.
Like what?
For instance, one instruction is to preemptively rouse your energy before you have to do some work, or after work, or before you go on a journey.
Why before?
Because the texts understand that it's really difficult to focus on instructions during an intense activity. So you build the determination, you make the resolution to attain the unattained before you actually need it. You're preparing your inner reserve of drive so that when the moment of challenge comes, you're not starting from zero.
You're preloading the energy.
You are. It's incredibly smart psychological advice.
Okay, so we have mindfulness, investigation, and it's all powered by this calibrated energy. The sources say that once that's all humming along, the fourth factor, rapture, pīti, naturally arises.
Rapture is the first great reward of the path. It's this spiritual joy and inspiration that just springs up because your seclusion and your effort have been successful. And it's a vital link in the chain we talked about earlier.
Right, joy leads to rapture.
Rapture leads to tranquility, and tranquility leads to bliss. It's a natural cascade.
Now, can you distinguish the different kinds of joy we experience?
Yeah.
Because the texts are very clear that this is not just ordinary everyday happiness.
Absolutely not. Think of rapture, pīti, as a sudden, energetic, sometimes physical jolt. It's like spiritual adrenaline. It can manifest as goosebumps, a feeling of lightness, a powerful wave washing through the body.
So it's quite intense.
It can be.
Yeah.
And this is what's called rapture not of the flesh. It's born of seclusion and immersion, completely separate from any kind of sensual stimulation.
And is that the only kind?
No, there's a level that's even finer than that. The
Wow.
texts call it rapture even more spiritual. This arises when the practitioner takes a moment to review their mind and sees clearly that it is free from greed, hate, and delusion. That feeling is profoundly confirming. It's not just the result of concentration, but the knowledge that you are becoming purified. And that acts as a massive psychological boost, which just fuels more effort.
That burst of intense, refined spiritual energy.
Yeah.
It sounds like it would need to stabilize at some point, which leads us right to tranquility. Sati, the fifth factor.
Exactly. Tranquility is both physical and mental calmness. The sometimes ecstatic, high-frequency energy of rapture settles down into a deep, pervasive stillness.
So if rapture is the jolt,
Tranquility is the moment the whole system just sighs, releases all tension, and becomes utterly poised and still. In this profound calmness of the body and the mind, this is what leads directly to bliss or sukha.
which is different from rapture.
Very different. Bliss is a profound spiritual happiness that is stable, calm, and sustaining. It's the perfect foundation for deep concentration.
Which brings us to the sixth factor, the unification of mind, immersion, or samadhi sambojjhaga.
Immersion is that state where the mind becomes completely unified. The texts describe it as bright, flawless, pliable, workable, and steady.
A perfect tool.
A perfect tool. And the texts say that a practitioner who has this depth of immersion truly understands because they're finally seeing reality through a perfectly clear, unmoving lens. This unified mind is then extended toward the final goal, knowledge of the ending of defilements.
Immersion sounds like a very high state, but the outline says it still requires fuel. What sustains this deep state of a unified mind?
The fuel is something we'll talk about more later, but it's the constant, frequent, rational application of mind yonisamanasikara.
Huh.
You have to repeatedly and intentionally direct the mind toward things that are the basis of serenity, toward things that lead to freedom from distraction. You're cultivating the habit of focus until the state of immersion arises on its own and becomes stable. It's that intentional self-management that makes the concentration stick.
And finally, that brings us to the seventh and final factor, equanimity, upekkha sambojjhaga. This feels like the most subtle and refined factor of all, arriving after all this intense bliss and unification.
It is. Equanimity is the ultimate balanced, detached awareness that you need for the final steps of insight. It's described as pure equanimity, a state that operates without the slightest ripple of pleasure or pain.
So even the profound bliss, the sukha of the earlier stages, has to be let go of.
It does, because even that is a subtle form of attachment if you cling to it. Equanimity is the mental stance that maintains perfect balance, preventing the mind from being swayed even by very refined spiritual pleasure.
So it's the final purification.
It ensures the concentration is absolutely clean, stable, and ready for true, liberating insight. And just like immersion, equanimity is fueled by that same rational application of mind, but now directed specifically toward things that are the grounds for perfect balance.
It's clear that these seven factors form a kind of cascading, self-reinforcing loop. But this is all a bit theoretical until it actually manifests in the core practice of meditation. So let's dive into how these factors function inside the four states of deep absorption, the jhanas, which are defined as right immersion.
This is where the architecture really shows its genius and its synergy. The jhanas are these profound states that are achieved through that deep seclusion from sensual pleasures and unskillful qualities we talked about.
And they show how mindfulness is the catalyst.
Exactly. Mindfulness is the catalyst, and the other factors become the actual characteristics of the state of absorption you enter.
Okay, so let's walk through them. The first, absorption. Which of the 7 factors are actively establishing themselves here?
The first absorption is characterized by a certain amount of initial activity. The mind is still being actively placed on the object, like the breath, and then it has to be kept connected to it.
So there's still effort involved.
A lot of effort. This active work demonstrates the presence of the energy factor working hard. And crucially, this state is defined by the arising of rapture and bliss pīti and sukha, both of which are born of that seclusion from the outside world.
So this is where tranquility gets established, and the mind starts to unify into immersion.
It's the strong establishment of them, yes, as the entire world of the 5 senses just drops away.
Okay, so energy is high, and rapture and bliss are flooding the system, which is a sign that you're on the right track. What changes as we move into the second absorption?
The second absorption is a profound refinement. The mind no longer needs that active effort. It drops the placing and the keeping connected.
So the energy factor becomes more subtle.
Much more subtle. And now the rapture and bliss are described as being born specifically of immersion itself, not just seclusion. This generates an incredible internal clarity and unification.
And the texts say the pleasure is different.
Yes, what's fascinating is the source describing the pleasure of the second jhana as being finer than the first. The ecstatic, maybe even overwhelming qualities of that initial rapture begin to subside. They're replaced by a deeper, more profound, and less active sense of joy. The mind is now truly at one.
The second absorption sounds incredibly powerful. But then the third absorption introduces a major shift, the fading away of rapture. Why? Why must rapture, which is such a strong sign of success, be abandoned?
It's an absolutely essential purification step. While rapture is a spiritual positive, it is still a feeling, and any feeling can create a subtle agitation or attachment.
So if you cling to that ecstatic feeling,
If the practitioner clings to the wonderful feeling of pīti, they can't achieve the deepest levels of stability. They get stuck there. So in the third absorption, the meditator has successfully let go of rapture. But they still meditate with equanimity, they are still mindful and aware, and they are personally experiencing bliss, or sukha.
okay. So the grosser, more energetic joy is gone, but the subtle, deep satisfaction remains, and it's held steady now by equanimity.
Exactly. This is where the equanimity factor strengthens dramatically. The practitioner is cultivating this perfectly balanced awareness that can accept the bliss without clinging to it, without getting excited by it.
That sounds like a very subtle skill, to be happy and tranquil without being swept away by the happiness itself.
It is, and it's what prepares the mind to transcend all sensation entirely.
Which is the fourth absorption, the culmination of this whole purification process.
The fourth absorption is defined by the complete transcendence of feeling. The practitioner gives up pleasure and pain entirely. They end all former happiness and sadness.
So what's left?
What's left is defined as pure equanimity and mindfulness, without any pleasure or pain. Even that remaining subtle bliss, the sukha, is now gone.
Wow.
And at this stage, the physical processes themselves become stilled. The breath can become so fine it's barely perceptible. This is the ultimate, perfected state of immersion, where the equanimity factor is absolutely unshakable. The mind is purified, bright, and utterly imperturbable. It's now ready for the final insight.
This whole landscape sounds like the mind is under incredible control. But what do the sources say is the biggest risk, the biggest danger in these high absorption states?
The primary risk is a very subtle one. It's clinging to the refined states themselves.
Attachment to the bliss.
Attachment to the bliss, or the tranquility, or the equanimity. The sources warn that immersion has to ensure that consciousness is neither scattered, externally chasing after sense objects, nor stuck internally.
And stuck internally means clinging to the pleasant states of meditation.
Precisely. If the mind clings to the rapture or the bliss of the early jhanas, it's just attached to a very subtle, very refined feeling. That attachment means it is not truly free. That's why the progressive purification through all 4 jhanas is so necessary. It's designed to overcome all attachment, even attachment to profound spiritual pleasure.
Achieving the synergy you've described in the jhanas, that requires incredibly fine-tuned mental discipline. So let's talk about the foundational mental skill that you said fuels this entire process. Rational application of mind, yoniso manasikara.
This is, I think, perhaps the most practical and often overlooked skill in the entire path. The sources call it the essential fuel for the whole set of 7 awakening factors.
What does it mean exactly? Rational application.
It means applying the mind correctly. It means directing your attention toward what is wholesome and what is conducive to the path. It's the direct opposite of irrational application of mind, which is harmful because that's when you direct your attention to things that generate more greed, more hate, and more delusion.
So how does it work as fuel? Can you give me a concrete example?
Think of it as a mental filter, or maybe a quality control process. When your mind is applied rationally, when you are intentionally directing your thoughts toward the 4 noble truths, toward impermanence, toward the benefits of ethical conduct, the 5 major hindrances just can't get a foothold.
The famous 5 hindrances.
Yes. They either don't arise at all, or if they have already arisen, they are immediately given up. Rational thinking starves them of their fuel.
So rational thinking is the precursor to effortless spiritual growth because it dismantles the primary barriers before they become big problems. Let's use that idea to look at the hindrances. Sensual desire is a classic one. How does rational application dismantle that kind of craving?
Okay. So when a strong sensual desire arises, the irrational application of mind, the default mode, says, this feeling is pleasant. It's necessary for my happiness. I must have it now.
Right.
The rational application of mind intervenes with sharp investigative insight. It says, wait, hold on. What is the true nature of this sensation? Is it permanent? Does clinging to this fleeting form or this feeling or this object, does it truly resolve the deep-seated craving for existence? Or does it just feed it?
An answer is always no.
The answer is always no. It will pass and the desire will return, probably stronger than before. By consistently applying this rational inquiry, you introduce that fading away and cessation into the desire itself. You see it for what it is.
Okay, let's take another one. Doubt. The hindrance of doubt, vicikiccha, can completely paralyze a practitioner, making them question the whole path.
Doubt is defeated by investigating principles. If doubt arises, is this whole path of concentration and letting go really worth all this effort? Is awakening even real? The irrational mind will just spin out, obsessing over the uncertainty.
Right.
But the rational mind applies the investigative factor. It says, okay, let's look at the evidence. I have already experienced tranquility and bliss because I've been living an ethical life. I have seen attachment fade away when I investigate my feelings directly. My own direct experience confirms that the path works. The fruit is evident.
So you use your own results as the evidence against the doubt.
Exactly. Yoniso manasikara uses direct, verified experience to undermine uncertainty. It's a very scientific approach, in a way.
And what about ill will or aversion? That seems like a powerful one that would directly block the arising of rapture and tranquility. The sources have a very practical method for dealing with resentment.
They do, and it's about radical acceptance. If you're angry at someone because they harmed you, the irrational loop is to constantly replay the offense in your mind, feeding the anger.
Which is what most of us do.
It is. The rational application is to stop that loop and realize, they harmed me, but what can I possibly do about that past deed right now? You sever the mental connection to the past, recognizing that the deed is done, it's unchangeable.
It's just a memory.
It's just a memory that you are re-energizing. And furthermore, the most powerful remedy is substitution.
How so?
Cultivating the heart's release by compassion is explicitly stated as the escape from thoughts of harming. You use your rational mind to intentionally replace the destructive, unskillful intention with its direct opposite. By doing that, you cultivate a mental environment where ill will simply cannot survive long enough to derail the factors of awakening.
So all of these factors, mindfulness, investigation, the way you defeat the hindrances, they all seem to rely heavily on the environment. We noted earlier that the entire architecture is built on seclusion. This physical environment feels critical for the factors to flourish.
It is absolutely fundamental. The sources repeatedly encourage practitioners to frequent secluded lodgings. The wilderness, the root of a tree, an empty hut.
Why is that so important?
This physical distance minimizes contact with the busy, complex world. It reduces the constant distracting sensory input that scatters the mind. You're giving the mind the space it needs to breathe and to apply that rational thought necessary to cultivate tranquility and equanimity. It's hard to do that in a noisy marketplace.
But the sources also contain a pretty sharp warning, don't they, about the peril that spiritual practitioners can face, even when they're in seclusion.
Yes, a very important one. A disciple might successfully retreat, develop these high states, and then gain a reputation for their practice.
And people start visiting.
And then they're visited by a stream of householders who offer reverence and support and gifts. The peril, the danger, is enjoying the infatuation, falling into greed for praise or offerings, and returning to indulgence right there in your secluded spot.
And those bad, unskillful qualities corrupt the whole thing.
They corrupt the high states you've achieved in seclusion, and they lead directly to further suffering and future rebirth. The sources emphasize that even after you've established physical seclusion, any proximity to the world requires immense vigilance, or the whole internal architecture just collapses.
We've really explored the architecture in detail. We have the ethical foundation, the rational fuel that powers it, the 7 functional factors, and how they culminate in the deep, balanced state of the fourth absorption. We've seen how they fit practically into the path. So now, let's confirm the final culmination of this entire system.
The culmination is total liberation. It's what the whole thing is for. The 7 awakening factors, when they are fully developed and cultivated, they fulfill knowledge and freedom.
And that is the complete and utter cessation of suffering.
Which the text define very precisely as the fading away and cessation of craving. Specifically, that threefold craving. The craving for sensual pleasures, the craving to continue existence, and the craving to end existence. All craving is gone.
And the result of achieving that true insight is this unshakable knowledge. It's the ultimate internal validation of the entire path.
It is. It's that moment when knowledge and vision arises and the perfected one can declare with absolute total certainty, my freedom is unshakable, this is my last rebirth, now there'll be no more future lives.
That declaration is the hallmark of success, the final purification of the mind.
It's the finish line.
Now, for those of us listening who are still navigating the path, striving for those higher stages, what is the first clear sign that this internal architecture, that these 7 factors, are truly starting to work? What does the beginning of awakening look like according to the sources?
We can define that by looking at the stage of the stream enterer. This is the noble disciple who has successfully and permanently given up the first 3 fetters.
Which are?
Identity view, the deep-seated belief in a permanent, separate self. Second is doubt about the path. That kind of doubt is gone forever. And third is attachment to rules and rituals, believing that external observances can lead to liberation.
So a stream enterer truly understands the 5 grasping aggregates.
They understand their origin, their ending, their gratification, their drawback, and the escape from them. They see the process clearly.
And the most crucial part of the stage is the guarantee it provides, right?
Yes. A stream enterer is defined as someone who is not liable to be reborn in the underworld. That's a huge deal. They are now bound for awakening. They may not be fully there yet, but they have transcended the worst possible outcomes and guarantee that their destiny is now fixed toward final freedom.
It demonstrates that success on this path is measurable. The architecture is robust enough to deliver on its promise. And it's not just for superhuman monks. The texts mention lay people achieving this.
Yes, like the layman Sudatta, it's a vital point. The framework, while it's often described using monastic terminology, is really a universal map of consciousness. It's available to anyone who is willing to apply that rational mind and cultivate these factors.
That's a great point. The difference between an ordinary person and what the texts call a true person is simply that acceptance of these teachings after you've deliberated on them and establishing that unwavering view.
It's a shift in perspective that becomes permanent.
This has been a really comprehensive look at the internal mechanics of liberation. So, to summarize the 7 architects of awakening for everyone listening.
We begin with mindfulness, the attention, which is the essential gateway. This supports investigation of principles, the insight into the true impermanent nature of reality.
That insight is sustained by energy, the drive.
The successful effort is then confirmed by the arising of rapture, which is then purified and calmed by tranquility.
The whole system is then stabilized by immersion, the unification of mind.
And finally, the perfect balance that's required for liberation is achieved with equanimity. It's a beautiful, logical progression.
And the most immediate, practical way to know it's working is internal. The sources remind us that investigating inside yourself is how you know that the 7 awakening factors are well implemented, so that they lead to living at ease. It's an internal, experiential system that confirms its own effectiveness.
And we have to remember the connection to intentionality, to karma. The sources stress that it's only when the path is fully completed that intentional deeds you've performed in the past are eliminated without having to be experienced in the future.
But until that final point,
Until that final point, the ethical person's heart's wish succeeds because of their purity. Your good intentions have a much higher chance of bearing fruit.
So as a final thought for you to consider, as you cultivate these 7 factors day by day, from mindfulness all the way to equanimity, you're not just working towards some distant abstract goal of extinguishment. You are actively shaping the very next moments of your continued existence. You are ensuring that your intentional deeds pave the way for freedom, not for further entanglement. The architecture is immediate, not just ultimate.
That is the daily power of the path.
Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive into the 7 architects of awakening. Until next time, keep investigating the principles inside yourself.